Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Bill Bennett Podcast. This is the Thanksgiving show, the official Thanksgiving show. On today's show, Bill and I will talk a little Thanksgiving. We'll talk football. We'll read some emails, and we will have a very, very, very special guest. That's right. Mrs. Bennett is going to join me in the second segment of the show today. Of course, we're going to do her table rules. We'll talk a little bit about the 30th anniversary edition of the Book of Virtues. Available now. I have already got a couple copies. I've got a copy for my son, Manny. I've got a copy for my nephew, Mason. A copy for my nephew, Jason. A copy for my niece, Kayla, my niece, Erin, my younger sister, Janai, because we want to make sure that these values are passed on. And so I've got several copies that are headed my way for the holidays. I want to gift these to these young people, and I'm sure you'll want to do the same thing. You can check it out on Amazon. Just type in the 30th edition of the Book of Virtues. And so, so we've got Dr. Bennett, we've got Mrs. Bennett, and so enjoy the show.
Hey, Claude, man, here we go. Thanksgiving week.
Mm-hmm.
Big week in our house. We already have the trial turkey.
Yeah, the trial turkey. Some people who are new to the show may not be familiar with this trial turkey situation. Talk about the trial turkey for a second.
I think you ought to elaborate. I know you're going to talk to Mrs. Bennett as well on this podcast. So I think she can give you more detail. But as I understand it, trial turkey is to test the system.
Right.
And to get extra gravy.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard one funny comment, which I prefer you didn't repeat to Mrs. Bennett.
Okay.
But the audience can hear it. She said, I didn't pay much attention to this trial turkey I just cooked, and it came out perfectly. And so she's worried that she'll press a real turkey, that she'll focus too much instead of being relaxed like she was with the first turkey.
Yeah.
I said, well, if that's the case, then just heat up the first turkey. She said, no, we have to have fresh turkey.
Right.
Whatever. I'll leave that to her and you. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
You got it. You know my girl. So. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Well, yeah, and so anyway, we got the trial turkey. That's all done. And any idea? I guess I could talk to Mrs. Bennett about what's on the menu and things like that. You want to talk a little football headed into?
Yeah. The only thing that's on the menu I should mention, it's mine, and she has strong objection to it, but she lets me have my own little dish of that cranberry jelly.
Oh yeah.
It comes in the can.
Mm-hmm.
When you open it up, it's got the shape of the can circles on it.
Yes.
And it shakes.
Right.
She makes a cranberry mold, a whole original thing with real cranberries and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like that. I like the sugary jelly one.
Right out the can. I'm right with you on that. My preference is the one right out the can. Do you slice it according to the ribs of the can? Like the way the can kind of, that's how you got to do. You slice it
horizontally. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But when I make the sandwich on Friday, I use mayonnaise, and you probably don't.
No, we don't do that.
But you don't do mayonnaise, do you?
Maybe I'll try this year. I'll try some mayonnaise on the sandwich.
I don't understand this cultural gap we have. Okay. All right. Okay.
All right. So before we get to emails, do you want to talk a little bit of football? I guess the biggest thing is Ohio State, Michigan headed into Thanksgiving weekend.
Well, I'm still an Alabama fan, and I see a way.
There's a way. Mm-hmm.
There's like 2% chance. Here's the way. The four now, I believe, are clear: Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU.
Correct.
However, one of those will drop out.
Correct.
Because Michigan or Ohio State, whoever loses, will probably go out unless it's a very close game.
Right.
Usually isn't. All right. So that would make it back to 3. USC then has a good argument, though they're very loose on defense. They had a shootout with UCLA.
Right.
And they won like 51-48. The announcer kept saying, whoever punts loses, because every team, they scored almost every time they had the ball, each team. So they could get in. However, Tennessee is now out. I mean, did you see that? They were destroyed.
I couldn't believe my eyes.
South Carolina.
I couldn't believe
63 points.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know the little background here, but the week before, Tennessee ran it up against Missouri.
Correct.
And they were criticized for that.
Mm-hmm.
They were throwing long passes when they had 56 points,
Mm-hmm.
And they were criticized. Well, South Carolina did the same thing to them.
Right.
And got 63. So Tennessee's gone. Forget it. They not be in the top 10. Plus their quarterback, Hendon Hooker, is out. All right. So they're out. So Alabama's maybe 7th now. They move up to 6th with Tennessee out. They're behind the 4 I mentioned plus USC. But they're ahead of Clemson because Clemson had a huge loss at Notre Dame. Yeah, Alabama has 2 losses, but by a total of 4 points.
Right.
1 field goal, 1 extra 2-point conversion. Well, that was LSU. I'm forgetting LSU in this mix. That's the other team that's ahead of Alabama. So LSU will win the West in the SEC. They will play Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
If they are very close to Georgia, they may stay in. They'll stay ahead of Alabama. But if they get destroyed by Georgia, they are a 3-loss team.
Right. They can't get in.
They've lost 2 games already.
Mm-hmm.
One of them to Tennessee.
Right.
And one of them, the first game, to Florida State. So under that scenario, people might say, come on, we all know Alabama's better. Problem is LSU beat Alabama head-to-head. But we'll see. We'll see. I think we've mentioned all the teams that are likely to get in. If USC then, I should finish that thought, goes and then plays in the Pac-12 championship, they'll play Utah or Washington or Oregon. Mm-hmm. Utah's already beat them.
Right.
And the other teams could beat them. So we'll see. So that's open. But the big news, of course, is the pro sports is how about them Cowboys?
40-3 over the Vikings. Yes.
And the Vikings were 7-1. The Vikings had beaten the Buffalo Bills the week before.
Mm-hmm.
But let's watch Thanksgiving. Let's see. They're playing the Giants on Thanksgiving.
That's a big game.
The Lions are playing someone. They're
playing Buffalo, actually.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So that's going to, we'll see how that works out. It usually doesn't work out well for for Detroit. So we'll see. We'll see.
That's right. You're right. Anyway, that's what's going on. That's all I know.
All right. Well, there you go. How about we jump into some emails?
Yeah, I like that.
All right. This one from our friend Howard Glass. He says, hi, Bill and Claude. I agree with you 100% about Trump. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I always agree 100% with you guys. He says he should not run, although we know he is going to run now. He says he cannot win again. Some voters care nothing about policy. Personality is all they see. He says, in my opinion, the Democrats have long been better politicians. Their policies are awful, but they know how to play voters.
Well, he's right about that. And I've said so. They know how to play the game better. Mm-hmm. I don't know if 2020 was stolen. I know there were a lot of mail-in voters. I know if 42,000 votes had changed, Trump would be president today. So I suspect, with all that mail-in stuff and all the confusion of the COVID, there were lots of opportunities to play hanky-panky. This time, I don't know if hanky-panky was played by the Democrats, but they did a better job. Mm-hmm. They got out to vote. They got the mail-in. I mean, Republicans focus on Election Day. One, and not on the months leading up to it, which Democrats do. So you need to play the game better. I agree with Howard. Second, we had a lot of candidates who weren't very good for the Senate. And I'm afraid, a lot of them were picked by Donald Trump. And I am, like Mark Thiessen, very grateful for his presidency. And I think it's one of the great conservative presidencies in American history in terms of the accomplishments on, the economy, foreign policy, crime, the border, Israel, excellent. Policy trumps personality up to a point. And the personality of Trump is such that I don't think he can get elected. I just don't think he can get elected. And the Republicans need to win the election in 2024. So I agree with Howard. Play the game better, get a good candidate. I think DeSantis is the best candidate. By the way, important difference between Trump and DeSantis. You know what it is in policy?
What's that?
Now, Trump switched, but Trump was in favor of the shutdowns. You remember when Governor Kemp in Georgia opened up Georgia, Trump criticized him, said he was putting his people in danger. Mm-hmm. It wasn't accurate. Kemp knew what he was doing. DeSantis did the same thing as Kemp. Trump then, don't you remember Trump up there saying, listen to Alexander Burks, And Fauci shut it down. He was for that. Now he switched, after Kemp and DeSantis, and said, "Well, let governors make the decision." But that was one big difference. I can't blame the guy, really. I didn't know what to do. Right. A lot of us didn't know what to do. But you certainly can't blame Kemp or DeSantis for keeping it open and not showing a much worse body count or a worse body count. Anyway, I don't think he can win. I'm grateful to him for his presidency, for his policies, and I'm disappointed in some of the things he said and did, how he acted, but he can't win. That's the bottom line.
All right. Let's move on to our friend Don. The first thing Don wanted to do was have a separation of the Dons, or maybe a clarification
separation
of the Dons. Yeah.
Party of the Dons.
Right. This is Don
Sounds
from
like
Washington.
a mafia thing.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? It says, Claude, this is Don from Redmond, Washington. It says, I've been honored to have you read several of my emails in the past few years, but on your November 14th, 2022 podcast, you read another email from Don that I did not write. So it sounds like you've confused the Dons, and perhaps you're guilty of fawning on the Dons. He says, in the future, if I'm again honored by having my email read, could you refer to me as Don from Washington State and the other Don as being from whichever state he resides? He's from South Florida. So I'm just trying to remember the email that we read. I think the email we read on the last show was from Don in South Florida.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's why Don in Washington is complaining.
Oh,
maybe he doesn't want to be confused.
It was
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. He says, that said, I must say that for the first time, I don't agree with Dr. Bennett. I was hoping that Mr. Trump would not run again, but now that he has declared he will undoubtedly win the Republican nomination, he may even clear the field. So with that reality, we must get behind him because we cannot allow another 4 years of Democratic control of the presidency. Wishing you both a happy Thanksgiving. Don from Washington.
I agree with the conclusion, but not the premise.
All right.
We cannot afford another 4 years of Democratic control. That's why we expect the candidate most likely to win. I don't think that's Donald Trump. If he's in the primary, I will not vote for him in the primary. I'll vote for DeSantis or someone else right now. But if he's the candidate, I'll support him. But I just think it's a real uphill battle if he's the candidate. Okay, Don from Washington.
Yes, not to be mistaken with Don from South Florida.
And by the way, have you ever sat in a coach seat like 32F from Miami to Seattle?
That's got to be tough.
I think that's one of the longest flights in America.
Yeah, I bet.
Nonstop, Miami to Seattle. I've done it, and it's tough. And I was in 32D or DEF, whatever it is. F, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible.
That's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't do it today.
Mm-hmm.
I have to get up too often.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Let's see.
I don't even want to talk about that.
Yeah, let's not even talk about it. Neil is checking in from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, home of
Lancaster. It's called Lancaster.
Yeah. Home of some great Amish farmers market, by the way.
Yes, right.
Let's see.
Amish potato salad should put that on the
Thanksgiving list.
Yeah, it's got mustard in it, but it also has mayo. So never mind.
We can mix it. We can mix it. That's good.
Well, Claude, I know you're okay.
Okay.
People are going to wonder what this mayo thing is. We're going to get mail, and you're going to have to answer.
I will. I certainly will. Let's see. As a conservative Republican voter from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, my wife and I voted for Mr. Trump in the last two elections, and we're very happy with the way he governed the country after winning the first time. It was sad to see him lose that last election, especially after witnessing the disaster that has taken place under the Biden administration. That said, my wife and I agree entirely with the contents of your podcast. We also feel that it's time for a change, and for the very reason that you alluded to, and our personal choice at this time would be Ron DeSantis. Although my wife and I would vote again for Donald Trump against any Democrat nominee, a number of my friends and relatives would not. And that is further proof to us that your podcast comments are well taken. Let's get your comments on that. And then Neil also sent some stuff about Thanksgiving.
This is not Don from Lancaster, right?
No, this is Neil.
We're done with the Dons for now.
Yeah, no more Dons. No more Dons.
Neil, I agree, Neil. I mean, I know. Yeah, I mean, I know people who are good, solid conservatives, and I know people who just are, run-of-the-mill, decent Republicans, and almost all the people I know in both groups do not want to see Trump as the nominee.
Right.
The welcome has been worn out. Embrace the legacy, Mr. President. You have a great one, but don't be Don Larson. You know who Don Larson was?
No.
Pitched I think still the only perfect game in a World Series. Perfect game he pitched. All by himself. 9 innings. They don't go 9 innings anymore, do they?
No. I mean, very rarely someone will pitch a complete game, but yeah.
He did a complete game, and it was a perfect game in the World Series.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess retired a little bit, but then he tried to stay in baseball. And I saw him 1966, I think, or 67 in Austin, Texas, playing for the AA Austin Braves.
Mm.
I mean, a crowd of maybe 80 people.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been at Yankee Stadium pitching a perfect game.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard he was warming up in the bullpen. I walked over, and there was nobody at the game, A couple of drunks there saying, "Hey, Larson, hey, Yankee Stadium." I mean, I was just thinking, I wish he hadn't ended his career like that.
Right.
Go out on the high, Go out when you're on the high. I was thinking the same thing about Brady. But, I don't know. The Tampa Bay is back. Maybe it's such a weak division. But I just wish Trump would, it'd be terrible if he's the nominee and gets beaten, and then says the election was stolen, and here we are again.
Right.
That's unfortunate. There's so much anger and bitterness in the Congress. And I see that McCarthy wants to deny Speaker McCarthy, likely for the Republicans, wants to deny seats to Schiff and Swalwell and others. And there's justice in that, but they got to be very careful that they don't just look vindictive and that they're fighting Democrats and punishing them and calling witnesses in the Hunter Biden thing. The Hunter Biden thing should have its own special counsel.
Okay.
They got one on Trump. They should certainly have one on this, but they don't. And do Republicans spend their time doing that? People are going to say, what about inflation? What about, the price of eggs, gasoline? So Republicans need to be careful on that front. Sorry, that wasn't what the email was about, but.
No, that's fine.
You got me thinking.
No, absolutely. Well, and then Neil finished up saying, pertaining to Thanksgiving, most of our family will be coming to our home for the holiday. It's always been that way. However, since my wife and I are now in our mid-80s and not physically able to do all the preparations, our daughter and oldest son has taken over this task. Most of our grandchildren, although they now live far and wide, will hopefully be here too. Even though we all usually end up eating too much, it's usually a very enjoyable and memorable event. And it says, as a final note, both my wife, Barbara, and I enjoy all of your podcasts very much and also are happy to see you as an occasional panel guest on Fox.
Oh, well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say this to Neil. It's Neil, right?
Yes.
It's not Dawn.
No, Neil.
Give up the Don thing now, right?
Yeah. Don in Washington will correct us if this is not Neil in Lansing.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get Neil from Detroit who will be upset.
Mm-hmm.
In the mid-'80s, eat all you want.
Yep. That's the thing, right?
Just eat all you daggone want. I don't care. And then go to sleep.
Since we end up eating too much, there's no such thing as that. Not on Thursday.
But if you're in your 80s, people don't expect you to be doing a whole hell of a lot anyway.
Yeah.
Just go to sleep, have turkey, have some wine, go to sleep, take a nap. Mm-hmm. Wake up for the Cowboys game or wake up for the Buffalo Bills game.
Right.
That's what I say. All right, Claude, anything else?
Yeah, you got time for one more email?
I do.
This is okay.
Oh, I love the emails.
All right. So this one, actually, it's an email. In their email, their name is not in it. So I have no clue who this is. So maybe
let's call him Don.
Yeah, Don, another Don from the internet. Has 4 points. They said, number one, there's no disputing that Trump brought 12 million additional voters to the polls. For a good segment of these voters, mainly high school educated white males from rural America, there's no Trumpism without Trump on the ballot. This Trump constituency couldn't care less what the GOP leaders or opinion leaders say here in rural Michigan. And so this is someone from Michigan. It's not uncommon to see Trump 2024 flags, homemade signs, and even repainted signs off barns.
I've heard this before. If you object to Trump, get off the interstate.
Mm-hmm.
Get off the interstate, go into the heartland of America, and you'll see Trump signs everywhere.
Yep.
I understand that. I understand that. And I agree with it. And I know why.
Point number two says Trump's motivation in announcing now may be to help inoculate himself from criminal indictment. Now he can claim any such action against him would be politically motivated.
You could claim that anyway, but yeah, there's certain more of a point to it. Yeah.
Point 3, he says, this is the big question. If Trump doesn't get to play quarterback, will he take his football and go home? A third-party candidacy would hand the Democrats, who have their own quandary of and shallow bench, a certain victory. And then it said, number 4, will Trump have the resources to compete through Super Tuesday? There's anecdotal evidence to suggest that the GOP donor class will no longer support him, and that his grassroots supporters are suffering from financial fatigue.
No, there is something to that. And it's a lot of the big boys, the big rich guys have already said they're not going to support a Trump candidacy. So I think there's a lot to that point. We'll just have to see how this plays out. I was interested to see a poll the other day where it's like 10 people were in it. Trump, DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and Trump, gets 36%, 38% of the vote, and the others divide it. That's like a 7 or 8 person field. 2-person field, DeSantis, Trump, DeSantis 60, Trump 40. So it'll depend. I think it could very well depend on the size of the field. What's interesting to me? We get these emails and, you didn't pick them by topic. You just picked them by, I don't know, whatever method you used. But they were all about the same thing. They're all about Trump.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there's plenty more where that came
Republicans from. It's all Republicans, conservatives are talking about.
And that's just a sample size. I didn't choose, obviously all the emails that we received. And I was hoping to get more Thanksgiving emails, but our friend Neil came through, with a really good one. But yeah, it's what everybody's talking about. And I imagine it's going to, remain that way for some time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know you're eager to talk to Mrs. Bennett.
Yeah.
Those table manners rules. And, can I tell you a little bit about the book?
Well, this is what I want to do. You and Mrs. Bennett, speaking of Mrs. Bennett, you have a project that you guys just released the 30th anniversary of the Book of Virtues, right?
Exactly right. And it's an update of the Book of Virtues, which was published in end of 93. And 30th anniversary edition. We're a little early, but not much. And it's got news stories, about 30% news stories, and updated for another generation. And if we needed it then, we even need it more now. Families crumbling, trust in institutions at an all-time low. Animosities are very deep, very strong. Not sure if we have confidence schools will teach character in the right way. So parents, it's always been up to parents first and foremost, but maybe even more so today. Well, the book is organized in that, each chapter, virtues like virtue of work or self-discipline or courage, starts with a very simple story. And then as you move on in that chapter, each chapter is about 60 pages. The selections get more complex, more difficult, not more difficult, but require a more sophisticated reading level. So it's for all ages. And you can read the upfront stories to a young child. Take the chapter on work. You can read the ant and the grasshopper. Ants were gathering up corn, and the grasshopper wanted to borrow some. And ant said, well, we were working while you were singing. Why don't you sing less and work more? And then at the end, we have the strenuous life speech of Teddy Roosevelt, man who's in the fight, in the arena. It's about being engaged and being at work. And there's an issue there because we have something like 7 million men. We had that interview with Nick Eberstadt. 7 million men, able-bodied, 25 to 55, who are not in the workforce at all. And they're not looking. And they're at home doing screen time. It's a serious matter. And cultivation of the virtues in our kids is something we have to do every generation, each time. So we think this is a great book for parents, grandparents. And Mrs. Bennett will have more to say. She was my co-author on this. Selected a lot of the stories and has a lot to say. And she's really dug into the friendship chapter because of her, her work, of course, is called Best Friends. Yeah. So you'll talk to her about that.
Yes. Can't wait to have her on. So it's become a yearly tradition that we started on the radio show, and now we're continuing with the podcast. It is Mrs. Bennett's Table Rules for Thanksgiving Dinner. And maybe not just for Thanksgiving dinner, maybe for dinner, period. However, I think for Thanksgiving, we just focus on these rules. Mrs. Bennett, how are you?
I am great, Claude. Looking forward to Thanksgiving, and I know you are too. You have a wonderful one. always with your family. And we just love Thanksgiving here. It's truly about being thankful and being together and sharing good food and companionship and just the kinds of things without gifts, unless somebody wants to bring an extra pumpkin pie, which is always appreciated.
Yes,
but it's something that we think and in our family, and I'm sure you're doing yours, that it is an opportunity to really express gratitude to the fact that we're together, that we love each other, that we have food to share, and that we have comforts, and to our Maker, whatever faith you happen to be. That's the beauty of Thanksgiving. But we just think it's an opportunity for children really to learn. Right. And that's the serious aspect of it. Then there's another aspect, which I decided, after our youngest son, Joe, who was a Marine at the time, they say once a Marine, always a Marine, was invited to dinner actually at Hugh Hewitt's house. He could not join us for Thanksgiving. He was serving at Dana Point in California. And I started thinking, oh my gosh, I hope I have schooled him correctly in the appropriate table manners. So this Mrs. Bennett's rules for Thanksgiving grew out of a text that I sent to Joe that I decided to, a serious text, but with some lighthearted moments that he actually shared at the dinner. And that the rest is history. Bill picked up on it, and you've picked up on it. And sometimes I feel a little odd reading it at my own dinner table when there are guests present. It was an in-house memo that has kind of gained notoriety.
And this has become a favorite for people who listen to the show and email in. They always want to make sure that we're going to do this every year. And so we've got to do this. We've got to do the 12 rule.
Well, thank you. And thank you for asking me to do this. And thanks to these wonderful listeners who care. That gives me great comfort that people still care about good manners. So I'll go through them. And then if you would like to elaborate, Claude.
Sure.
You have wonderful manners. So you may have some things you may wish to add. Okay. But number one, napkin in the lap.
Okay.
Which is something my sons, I still have to say, point to the napkin to get it right there in the lap. It's important. Have to get it off the table in the lap. Number two, drink only from the glass or glasses to the right over the knife.
Okay.
And the knife will be to the right of your plate. Number three, your bread and butter plate and your salad plate is to the left over the fork. And that is a good reason that we try to teach children knife and spoon on the right, fork on the left.
Okay.
Now, someone taught me, actually a principal in DC Public Schools says, Elaine, a good way to remember this is BMW. Most kids know that a BMW is a car. It's a great thing. And teenagers and college-age kids and beyond. But she explained it like this: bread, meal, water, meaning your water's always to the right. So we use this phrase with our Diamond Girls and Best Men when we had some lovely luncheons in the city, and they were interested in learning etiquette. Mm-hmm. So we used the idea of BMW, and they got it down. I have discovered that privileged kids do not always grab the significance as quickly. Number four, no talking with your mouth full.
Okay. Yep.
And I'll just leave that one right there for obvious reasons.
Uh-huh.
Number five, try very hard not to spill your food on the table and up the front of your shirt, and especially on your tie, if you're wearing one, which I think is a very nice tribute to your hostess if you do show up in a tie.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
My boys are genetically predisposed to filling things up the front. And yes. I will not tell them which part of their genetic heritage that came from.
Mm-hmm. Something tells me that people can guess. I think they know where they may get that from.
I will leave that up to the audience. Number 6, and I think this is important and is not followed that closely in this day and age, but wait until the lady of the house is seated and has raised her fork.
There you go. Okay.
It's just important not to dive in. It's a sign of respect to wait until, and most of the time it is a she, is seated. And then once that fork is raised, then the other people at the dining table may raise their fork. I have told people at my house as I'm running back and forth, please, it's warm. Don't wait for me.
That's what I was going to ask, because sometimes we'll come across these, much like yourself, gracious hostesses who are doing so much. And they said, no, don't wait, don't wait. Do we insist to wait? What's that back and forth? If they insist that we go, we just go ahead and go, or?
Well, there is a point, and there's a number 7. Always wait, especially at significant meals, for a prayer or blessing for the food. So the host or the hostess can stand and say, we'd like to now bless our food. At that point, the hostess, as I have done, can say, please begin eating while I go and fetch the hot gravy. Oh. So I'm giving those a little door of opportunity here, but it is very nice, especially at Thanksgiving, to give thanks. Number 8, do not blow your nose at the table. Yeah. Seen it done.
Yeah. That's the reason behind my laugh. Yes.
And especially in your napkin.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. That's not allowed ever, any way, shape, or form. Now, number 9, and I have a reason. If you are serving wine with your dinner and you happen to be at the head of the table, or even depending on, or even a guest, do not place the wine bottle on the floor by your chair. I will not elaborate on this much further, other than to say that has been done at my dinner table, to my great dismay. Number 10, do not punctuate your sentences in any way with your silverware.
Oh, yeah.
As you were trying to make a point, you do not make that point with your knife, or as you are eating and your fork is in your hand and you're having a discussion. Do not swirl your fork around in the air. Particularly when trying to say, okay, hurry up, if someone's talking. I've seen that done. Number 11, always personally thank the hostess and tell her the food was delicious.
Yes.
That is so important. Just a word to the hostess. This was just a delicious Thanksgiving, a delicious dinner. Thank you so much.
Is it okay to point out specific dishes that you liked, or should you just leave the entire?
That's always, thank you so much. The dinner was delicious. I especially enjoyed the blank.
There we go. Okay.
This is especially important. If you have left enough food on the floor under your chair for the family dog's next meal. I have had that happen where nary a word was said that this individual enjoyed the food, but there was a lot of food under the chair. And number 12, if you want your mother to go to her grave with a peaceful heart, offer to clear the table, take out the garbage, and always follow up with a handwritten thank you note. An email is a second best, but not the ultimate. I have on file all of the handwritten notes from the young people, especially, and older people too, who have joined us at many dinners, especially Thanksgiving. And I treasure them. I go back and reread them. I have to tell you, the file has gotten thinner in the past several years as people have resorted to texting and emails. It's just a lovely thing to do.
Sure.
And some of these time-honored traditions are ones that if we don't encourage them, Claude, they're going to fade away.
Right. They won't last.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for the table rules. Now, we've got two other things we've got to talk about.
Okay.
Bill oftentimes on the show talks about the, I think he calls it the trial turkey or the test turkey. What's this all about?
You can call it the trial, the rehearsal, or the gravy turkey.
Right.
After years, I think I've cooked Thanksgiving dinner now every Thanksgiving for 40 years.
Wow.
Wherever I happen to be, even in my first years of marriage, and I invite my mother, and I was anxious that I measure up because she was a wonderful, wonderful cook. And she taught me a lot, but she didn't teach me. She often liked to be in the kitchen on her own because she thought that her children just might mess things up.
Sure.
So she banished us from the kitchen, but I made her teach me how to make gravy when I was much older. But the gravy turkey I hit upon when I realized that we would always run out of gravy. And my dear husband wanted turkey the next day with gravy on it. He wanted a sandwich, open-faced, with gravy and cranberry. And I make a fresh cranberry mold on the side, although he's been known to grab the canned cranberry. And the gravy turkey, in fact, I just made one yesterday, and I don't fret over it. I just put it in the oven at 275. But my whole purpose of that turkey, Claude, is to have more drippings for gravy. So I have double the amount of gravy.
Okay.
And as I've discovered, I also have lots of extra white meat and dark meat because I happen to enjoy dark meat. So this one really was a surprise to me because I kind of put it in there, put a little butter on it, stuck an onion and a stalk of celery in, but I cooked it at 275. I wasn't getting the drippings that I needed, Claude. So I added a little turkey stock and I continued to cook it. And I have to tell you, not only did I get wonderful drippings, but I got the best white meat I have ever had.
That's what I heard. I heard that this trial turkey, without even thinking about it or all the preparation, without caring at all, came out like the best ever.
Delicious, just delicious. In fact, it may make the grand turkey put it to shame. So I am slicing up. So I'll have extra white meat. But Bill discovered that the trial turkey was in the oven. I mean, actually in the refrigerator. And had to have a turkey sandwich. He said, this is the absolute best. So, I didn't get organic. I good old butterball. And this one was frozen. Now I have a fresh one for Thanksgiving.
Okay. All right.
That I will cook that morning, but I'm going to go to the long, slow method.
That's right. Yeah. And try not to stress over it because obviously the stress, the less stress on the first one, came out. So
this was a stress-free turkey. And somehow he just decided he was just going to reward me because I actually took the turkey out, drained the drippings off, let it sit out for a while, kind of forgot about it. Then I said, I better cook it some more, threw it back in for a little longer. And then I kept ranging the temperature between about 3. Now I put it up to 315 and it got crisp. It was also a beautiful turkey.
Nice.
So I guess my message is, after many years, I guess this is probably, when I count it up, I guess I've done probably the 100th turkey I've cooked, because of two turkeys for the last few years, the last 10 years. I think that take stress out of it, be happy, and maybe the key is the 2 turkeys, your stress-free one, 2 days or 3 days before. And then you've got turkey, right?
Right.
So no matter what happens, you've got a stress-free turkey.
That's right.
So and this is to new cooks, new hostesses who are worried, and I read all the books, read all the stuff on how to do turkey, and the best is baste it with butter. If you don't want to dress your turkey, or, put your inside is dressing, outside is stuffing. If you like to do different things in pans, and both are delicious. I do both. I put dressing, I'll stuff my turkey, and then I'll also have a pan of dressing. Okay. With different things in it, particularly if you like to put oysters, or some people like almonds, some people put cranberries.
Sure.
But just do it with love, and do it with the idea that you've got your loved ones, your family, your friends around the table, and it'll taste delicious.
There you go. And if I can steal 5 more minutes from you, the 30th anniversary of the Book of Virtues.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We're out and available now. Yeah. And you were able, and you co-authored this. Let's talk about the new stories and what's important, and why we're talking about values and bringing them back to the forefront nowadays.
Well, and I have to thank Simon & Schuster for this. They suggested that, because Bill had referred to me often throughout this process, and I did work very hard with the illustrations and the children's books, which I just adore. These stories in the Book of Virtues, which is a new one, the 30th anniversary edition, have some of the time-honored stories, have some of the children's stories, have new material. And as I read it, I'm just so thrilled with it. I want to take my children back, 20 years and reread them. But now I have fabulous a grandson who is 2 soon, and I'm going to have a second grandchild. His little sister is going to be born in the next few months. So we're delighted. But one of the things I discovered, Claude, is that when you ask people, what are the virtues? And they'll come up with a few, but some people are a little confused. What is a virtue? Someone said the other day, well, is it integrity? I said, well, that sounds like a good one. In the Book of Virtues, we have self-discipline, faith, responsibility, courage, compassion, loyalty, honesty, friendship, and persistence, which is an interesting term, persistence. The story that I think is so important that I learned growing up, but I'm not sure children today know about, who Helen Keller was and what she had to overcome, and her teacher. And the beauty of these stories is that you can read them in 15 minutes and you have and the point comes across. If you need to make a point to your child, particularly if you're seeing that he or she is in need of instruction, you don't have to read a long story. These are quick stories that make the point beautifully. And I reread Annie Sullivan and Helen Keller. And Helen was, due to a childhood illness, at 2 became blind and deaf, if you can imagine having that kind of a handicap. And Anne came in, and through her incredible ability and here you go, persistence, loyalty, compassion, she was able to break through the darkness that was Helen Keller's world. And Helen Keller went on to become just an amazing person. She lectured, she wrote books, she traveled all over the world. She learned to speak. She had kind of an odd, kind of high speaking voice, but no matter what she said was just so worth hearing. And I think Bill is the one who quoted this. It was a beautiful story, a beautiful quote, that no friendship is as sacred as that between student and teacher. And Helen Keller will be the first to say that the most important day of her life was when her teacher came to her. Said, when my teacher came to me. And I just think that's a story that any of us who are moved to teach children, whether it's our own children or a classroom of children, it's just a lovely story and a true story. And there is actually a movie about it. Mm-hmm. So her teacher turned her childhood that began in darkness and loneliness. She turned it into a life of much joy and learning. And so I always thought that was just a great story for young people to know about. And I don't think a lot of young people today know who Father Flanagan was.
Right.
And what Boys Town. I have seen advertisements now for Boys Town. It's now for girls as well, which is great. But in 1917, in Omaha, Nebraska, he noticed that the group that was causing trouble in Omaha were boys with no fathers, no one to show them right from wrong. Many of them had no mothers either. And they just became, as they called them then, troubled kids. And he said, I'm going to start a house, which he did. He went around, asked for help in the community. And he said, I'm going to start a house and I'm going to take the most troubled boys first and put them where they can feel safe. And he did that. And there was just a transformation of these young boys. And then people realized that he was doing something terrific and he got more resources. They actually built their own, as they call it, Boys Town, their own facility. And one day a boy came to Boys Town who had no parents and he couldn't walk. And one of the other boys who was there picked him up and was hoisting him, on his back, carrying him, just like you've seen the pictures of the Marines and the other soldiers carry their comrades off the field, on their back. And Father Flanagan said, he's too heavy for you, just wait. And he said, Father, he's not too heavy. He's my brother. And I have that statue. And of course, I have two sons. So that was particularly meaningful to me. But, he's my brother. She's my sister. Mm-hmm. And they weren't related. They weren't related by blood. But he felt that this newcomer, this young boy, he was at Boys Town with him. And now he was his brother. You don't have to be, blood relatives to feel brotherhood. And the same way with sister, she's my sister. He's my brother. Mm-hmm. But I think to read that story is one that could make a difference. It's a story that we kind of pulled through some other stories. And Pauline Hamlet, who was the principal who opened the doors to Best Friends when Bill was Secretary of Ed, and Amadon Elementary was our adopted school. And her husband was Officer Hamlet. Mm-hmm. So he's a character in this, and how Tashira watches Officer Hamlet and helping others and doing good. And so she finds an opportunity when it's her turn to help. And it's just a beautiful story.
Absolutely. And you would know, we talk about the Best Friends Foundation all the time on the show. You have your sleeves rolled up and you're doing the work right there in Washington, D.C., in the schools where it's needed most. And so for your work with the children's, with the Book of Virtues and your Best Friends work, and also making sure we're, have our T's crossed and our I's dotted on Thanksgiving at the dinner table. Thank you so much, Bennett, for everything that you do and joining us on the show today.
Well, and thank you, Claude, for just being the great man that you are. The fact that you're such a good husband and such a good father to Manny, and as I'm finding out, you are a good son-in-law, and you respect your mother-in-law, and as a mother-in-law now, I'm loving that.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
And
I wish you a wonderful Thanksgiving for you and Sierra. And I know you'll be with a big crowd. We have 11 this year.
Oh, nice.
And I'm thrilled. 11 and a toddler.
There you go.
And William, young William. So
yeah. And by the way, young William is just adorable. He's captivating. You can't look him in the eyes and not be captivated by him. He's got a great smile, wonderful eyes, and just great personality too. He's got a great personality.
He does, and he thinks you're very cool. So he just wants to see you and run in and have you throw that football.
Oh yeah. We played some football. We played some football not too long ago. So, well, thank you, Mrs. Bennett. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Claude. It's a pleasure.
All right, everybody, that's the Thanksgiving edition of the Bill Bennett Podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Email the show, billbennettpodcast@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. We didn't get a lot of Thanksgiving emails, and I understand why. Everyone's got concerns about, the country and politics and where the country's headed. But hopefully during this season, we can, pause, be thankful for what we have, spend time with your family and friends. But just email in, what you did for Thanksgiving, what you're going to do over the holiday season. We'd love to hear from you. BillBennettPodcast@gmail.com. All right, we'll catch up next week.